Hey guys, Edre here, and today I'm going to be doing a brand new review of the new King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album, KG. Now, a bit of background like I do with all of my reviews. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, or I'm just going to say King Gizzard in this video so I don't have to keep on saying that. They're a band that I've been well aware of for a little while now, but admittedly, I haven't really dived too deep into their music or their discography. Mainly just because I've always been a little overwhelmed by them because they seem to release so much music. However, they've only really released one studio album this year, and I was able to check out some of their previous work, some of their previous songs and stuff like that, to get a general idea going into this review. And on this album, KG, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard do play into a lot of what they were already known for. I mean, for those who don't know, King Gizzard has a very psychedelic and very garage rock and even prog rock sound to them. And they continue to have this sort of 60s, 70s psychedelic influence in their music, but really do take it into a new direction, a much more modern flair to it, and really do make it their own. They don't feel like a copycat band of Pink Floyd or anything like that. Instead, I do feel like they do make the genre their own, and I really appreciate that. Going on to this album, my expectations were pretty good, because at the end of the day, I have liked what I've heard so far. My personal opinion, I've yet to be very blown away by much of their music, but I've also yet to be that disappointed either. So, let's get into the actual gritty, nitty-gritty of this album. This album opens up with a track that has this medieval-sounding flute and guitar plucking in it, acoustic guitar plucking, on KGLW, which I'm guessing is the acronym for King Gizzard. And, that's sort of a little off-putting intro. It's a sort of a little goofy intro. It's not long before you get into the meat of this album. The sound of this album goes down a path that we were already kind of accustomed to and used to when it comes down to it. Once again, a much more psychedelic tone on the second track here, or the first real song, Automation, with twangy guitar riffs all around, and overall psychedelic production, too. I was left feeling on the song Automation content. I didn't think it was anything groundbreaking or that unique to this album versus anything else they've done, but at the bottom line, it was a good song. However, it wouldn't be long until we actually do get into a few tracks that I do think are very promising. One of the best songs on here, Minimum Brain Size, I think sees this really fat drum groove, which I think is really awesome, with these twangy guitars that I just love, and even a solid chorus. And when I say a solid chorus, it's not necessarily a memorable, catchy pop chorus that you're going to be humming in your head, but it's a chorus that really does give the vibe and overall tone of the song a good centerpiece, if you know what I mean. It's a good centerpiece of a song that really does fit it quite well. I mean, I love the twangy instrumentation of this song, and I thought Minimum Brain Size was one of the highlights on this album. There's sort of this, with a voice crack, there's sort of this Middle Eastern tone on some of the twangy riffs on this album, which I think is a nice little addition into their sound. And the song Some of Us might have some of the most Middle Eastern and sounding chord progressions throughout, with, once again, you're going to hear me saying this a lot, the twangy guitar tones and the overall progressions are really present here. But there's also a nice swooping synthesizer throughout this track, Some of Us. And overall, I think Some of Us really does prove to be one of the musically most engaging tracks on this album. I love the way they use the synthesizers on this track are astronomically good, and I love it. And the other song that really did stick out to me quite a bit here was the song Intrasport, which was a song that where you see the band really embrace a more soulful, a much more funky Motown style track here, with a very fat, solid drum groove, very dance oriented track, with overall just a really captivating overall instrumentation. I think Intrasport is one of the most solid tracks on here. It seems to be the most popular on here as well. So overall, I think Intrasport was one of the highlights for me as well. However, this album closes with its best track, in my opinion. The psychedelic metal track, The Hungry Wolf of Fate, is not only is the guitar tone killer, the overall chord progression, the sludginess of the song, reminiscent of that of Black Sabbath or of the 90s band Neurosis. The sludginess on this song is just killer. Like I said, not only is the guitar tone killer, but the style of production on this album really fits this raw, gritty metal track perfectly, and I think this was the perfect way King Gizzard could have closed this album. However, not everything is positive. I do think there is quite a few songs on here that do sort of just leave me in the middle. I feel like there is quite a few filler tracks on here, as well as some of the more experimental acoustic tracks on here. While I appreciate the experimentation, a song like Straws in the Wind just don't come across as nearly as innovative as many of the other songs on here and don't leave nearly as much of a lasting impact. And despite the excellent drumming and overall just performance on the song Ontology, the track at its core, in my opinion, just is not the best. It does seem to have a not so great melody to it. And, well, it is a jam. It's definitely the sound of a band that's just jamming out. It's an alright jam. It's a pretty solid jam. It's just I don't feel like the song itself really does much to really add much character to this album. And unfortunately, I was left feeling indifferent. The last thing I'm going to touch upon really is the production, because lyrically it's sort of a very psychedelic album. I don't have too much negative or positive to really say when it comes down to the lyrics, but production-wise, it's a fairly raw produced album. It's very raw, gritty, and dirty sounding album the way it's produced, and I actually think it fits this style of music quite well. This style of psychedelic music, this and their take on it, should not be produced that polished. It should be more raw, should be more gritty in your face, and it gives the listener more of an insight as to the making of this album, and I really do think that the production does help this album out a bit. At the end of the day, even though I do think that King Gizzard has such a wide discography, it's hard to say where this album really falls in comparison to many of their other projects, and even though I do think some of the songs on here are filler, overall I was left satisfied. I did think King Gizzard really did do a solid psychedelic album in 2020 that continues to prove that they know how to take this genre and style of music and continue to make it relevant in today's day and age. With all that being said, I have settled on giving this album, KG, a strong 7 out of 10, and anybody that doesn't know my reviews needs to know anything above a 5 is good, anything below a 5 is negative. So a 7 is quite a positive review. It's not my most positive review, but I did enjoy this album. I do think King Gizzard continues to be one of the most innovative psychedelic bands out there in today's age of music. And while they do take a lot of influence from the 60s and 70s artists, they make it their own, and they continue to do so on their brand new LP, KG. And that is it for now. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, KG. Strong 7 out of 10.